Aloha, everybody. Welcome to Tiki Tuesday Talks. Excited to be here. I have a new shirt, which I'm very excited about. Looking forward to a great session, kind of getting into the nitty-gritty on the technicalities of labeling, transparency, and the like. We got an all-star cast here. Let me introduce them right now. Say hello, everybody.
Aloha.
What's going on? Where's everybody calling in from?
Connecticut.
Birmingham.
Baltimore.
Los Angeles, California.
Oakland, California.
Right on. Welcome, everybody. We'll go over a little bit of the run of show here for a second with you guys. So, topic today, transparency and alcohol labeling. We're excited to have Bailey Pryor, founder and CEO of the Real McCoy, as well as Nathan Hazard, National Brand Ambassador for the Real McCoy, talking about kind of some of the things that have been going on in labeling, where we're going. We're going to also have a great cocktail coming out of that. A little bit on agenda. So, aloha. Chat box and questions on the right side. If you guys have questions, send them our way. If you're viewing on Facebook, we'll see them there too. We'll kind of interject. Sharing the event in Crowdcast as well. You can do that over on the right. Feel free to host a watching party, etc. We want to get the word out about what we're doing here and some of this great content. Presentation-wise, 30 to 40 minutes. We'll have a cocktail session, 10 to 15 with a little bit of a topic. And then 5 questions with the Tiki fam. A little background. So Bailey, founder and CEO, a man of many hats. So he produced a number of films for PBS, particularly one on the Real McCoy. So kind of near and dear to his heart in building into that. I'm sure he's going to touch on it. Has won a number of Emmy Awards, 17 to be exact, 17 nominations, 7 awards, and produced 7 feature films across a variety of platforms. So super excited to have him and his expertise here. Nathan Hazard, National Brand Ambassador, co-founded the Coconut Club, LA's premier Tiki-inspired supper club. Super cool. Never experienced it, but I need to in a normal universe. And has been published across a variety of awesome books. I'm sure you're aware of some of these. So without further ado, we will move it over to Mr. Pryor to have a chat here. How you doing, sir?
Good. How about you, Pete?
Not too bad. Not
Excellent.
too bad.
Hope everybody's having a great day.
As good as it can be for being stuck inside.
Yeah. We're not in New Jersey right now. It's bizarre.
Indeed. Yeah. It feels, I'm getting the dispatches from my parents on Crab Cake Hotline and the like. And it's pretty sad not to be there. I did get to the beach for a couple days and ate a ton of fresh seafood on a dock. So at least I had some semblance of normalcy there.
Nice. That's great. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Tell us about the lab you got back there. What's going on in there?
Oh, so we're doing a discussion about, today we're going to be doing a discussion about labeling. And it's a pretty interesting topic, actually, because it affects just about everybody and has a lot to do with public safety. So that's our big thing. But here in Connecticut, we're actually building a new distillery. So we're under construction right now. I'm hoping to get going within a month or two. We've been under construction for a while, and so I'm going to be producing products. I've been apprenticing with Richard Seal for like 10 years. So I'm going to take all the learnings from that. I also did times. I went down and learned from some of the folks at Rhum Clément in Martinique, and Rhum Nissan, especially in Martinique. And then I'm applying all of that now to some new concepts. And we're going to develop new things and play around with it.
Amazing. Can you talk about what you're going to be doing, or is that top secret information?
It's not that it's top secret. It's just sort of still in flux. I'm really focused on the complexity of building a new distillery. It's a very complicated thing. It's the first distillery that I've built, but it's really great because I'm handling all the engineering side of it. I'm doing, I'm concerned with all the chemistry and the various processes that we're going to do to accomplish our goals. We're doing everything completely naturally, so we don't do any additives. There won't be any, people put things in fermentations to control them and things like that. If you're more on an industrial scale, we're going with the very traditional processes, all inspired by the time I've spent learning from Richard Seal.
Awesome. Very cool. How about the stills? Can you tell us anything about the still that you're going to have over there?
Yeah, I have a beautiful, this is a test facility. I'm going to show you a picture here. This is a test facility, so it's a small operation, but basically what we're doing is we have a custom-made double retort pot still from the Forsyth Company in Scotland, and here it is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they custom made this for me. It's the traditional, Caribbean style pot still. If you know Scotch whiskey and things like that, they use two stills to do distillations. They have a wash still. It gets the spirit to about 35 degrees, 35%, and then you put it in a smaller spirit still, and that gets you up to a high ABV. And so in this case, we have two little retorts that do the same thing. So there's only about 6 of these types of stills that I know of left in the Caribbean. And so I wanted to kind of honor that tradition. So I brought, had Forsyths, who made the still for Richard Seal, make me a still. And we're setting it up in Connecticut.
Well, hopefully you can have us check that out once you get things rolling. So
Definitely. Yeah. Next year will be fun. Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. Right on. So let us take us into the world here.
Sure. So, alcohol labeling is a very interesting subject for me because I have a sulfite allergy that's pretty intense. So when I drink wines or various beverage alcohol that has sulfites in it, I have a very severe allergic reaction. And so it can even inhibit my ability to breathe. So I feel like I'm choking to death. So it's awful. And we have no system in the United States to put this kind of information on our beverage alcohol containers. You can't buy a box of cereal in the United States or any type of processed food. You can't buy a can of soda. You can't buy a jug of juice or milk without ingredients and serving facts listed on those on the packaging, on the bottles, and the boxes. In beverage alcohol, nothing has that requirement. So there's no beers, no wines, no spirits that are required to disclose their ingredients, or that they're required to disclose their serving facts, meaning how many carbs, calories, fat, things like that. So from our perspective, we've always looked at this as that being kind of a hole in the system. And we thought it would be really great if we could increase the transparency to our consumers, because people want to know what they're putting in their bodies. They care about what they're drinking. I think a lot of people drink less now than they did, a decade or two ago, but they drink better. And so, if you're going to have a cocktail, you want to have good stuff. And so I think that's important to a lot of people, especially people like vegetarians who are not informed that, especially in the wine industry, sometimes in the beer industry, they use what's called a clarifying agent. And clarifying agents will make a cloudy liquid appear clear. And so what they make clarifying agents out of are animal products. So it's made out of usually the dried intestines of fish and chickens are ground up into this powder, and they drop that in the huge vat of wine, and it will clarify the cloud, get rid of the clouds of stuff that are in the amino acids and things that are in the wine, and make it clear. because consumers have been trained to think that beers and wines all need to be clear, and spirits, and that's not actually the case, really, in nature. So, so they don't realize that vegetarians don't realize they're being given, food products in their wines. Sometimes they're beers, sometimes they're spirits. So I think it's important that we talk about these things because people have peanut allergies, they've got wheat allergies and gluten-related issues, they've got sulfite issues, and so on. None of this stuff is disclosed on any level in the beverage alcohol industry. So my wife Jennifer has really been the one to sort of spearhead this process for us, and it's been her goal to really get this information on our labels. And so we've spent 3 years trying to get labels approved in the United States that had serving facts and ingredients. And after 3 years, we finally got one. So this is actually the very first bottle of alcohol in the United States that's going to have, oops, here we go, ingredients right here and serving facts on the label. And this has been approved by the TTB. So this is like a bellwether moment in beverage alcohol. This is our new limited edition that comes out this month. It's a 12-year new limited. We only did about 6,000 bottles of this, so it's going to be kind of a collector's item, I think. And the idea is that we disclose what we have in it. And if you look at our ingredients are rum and Barbados spring water. And
very complicated, hard to understand.
Yeah, but there are products out there that would have to have like a list of what is in there, what they're adding. So that's going to be difficult for people, and I understand there's going to be pushback against this, but I think it's a public safety issue more than anything. And like I've had margaritas before that literally I thought I was going to choke to death from the sulfites that were either in the spirit or in the mixer. Didn't see anything listed on the mixer, so I'm assuming for whatever reason they had sulfites in the spirit. So sometimes people use them for preservatives and other things, especially if you're adding something like sweeteners and stuff. So
questions for you.
Sure.
In terms of sulfites and things of that nature, I mean, do you have a ballpark range that you think, typical products out there, what percentage of those products might have some of those things?
In wine, it's very high because it's a preservative for wine. Wines and beers go bad in a relative period of time. Beer especially goes bad quickly within 6 months or so. Wines can have issues, so they use preservatives. And I'm not a wine expert by any stretch, but what I've learned over the years is that sulfite is a very, very common product that's added to wines, and so are clarifying agents and things like that. So the majority of the wines, I would guess, from the United States maybe are going to have some of that amount. I think there's less of it in the European wines. It literally takes one sip for me to know if there's any sulfite in that glass. If I get a glass of wine and I take a tiny little sip of it, I will immediately turn red all around here. On my ears will turn red, and I'll just start having this histamine reaction.
Wow.
And everybody at the dinner table, I'm like the canary in the coal mine. Everybody at the dinner table knows there's sulfite in the wine. So they all let Bailey sip it first and see what happens. So if I've found that the European wines, if they're using sulfites, they're using a smaller amount, and I'm not having the reaction from most of the European wines. But most of the California wines, I am having the reaction. So I don't know whether that's a cultural thing or whether it's some component of what's going on with water supply, and they need to balance out pH and other things, and they might use sulfites for that as an acid. I don't know. So or as a base, sorry. So the idea is to have this information disclosed, and we think it's a good idea. When you're talking to people about your serving facts, which you see right here, we show that there's 1.5 fluid ounces to a serving, which is the average in most cocktails, and that we have a serving of 122 calories for 1.5 fluid ounces. So it's like 60-something calories an ounce, or 70-something calories an ounce. But there's 0 carbs, 0 fat, and 0 protein. The one thing missing from this, the only thing that TTB wouldn't let us put on the label was how many grams of sugar. And we, of course, have 0 grams of sugar because we don't add sugar. But the TTB would not allow us to put that on the label, which I thought was really bizarre. So we pushed back a little bit. We tried to get them to allow that, and they just said, we're not going to have that conversation because I think it opens up too much of a can of worms in the beverage alcohol industry. If Prosecco starts having to disclose how much sugar they're adding and things like that, people will freak out. So they let us get that far, and that's huge. That's like 90% of what we wanted to accomplish. So it was great. So I think that's a good starting point. And as time goes by, we want to try to push to get the sugar disclosed, because if you look at the FDA regulations and the FDA mandatories, they call it, on all the boxes of food, you have to say how much sugar's been added. So not quite yet in alcohol, but this is huge. This is a huge moment, and we want all the other producers out there who are also, want to have this kind of transparency for their consumers to please join us and do this, because, like Avua, you guys don't add anything to your products, and neither did Appleton or any of these guys, Richard Seal or all the Rum Clément and the Rum JM, and there's so many products out there that are really easy to get their information listed on their label. It doesn't take up a lot of real estate. There's going to be others where the disclosure will take up the entire back label probably. So
right.
That's going to be hard for them to accept.
Right.
So, and I think we just take steps toward a more transparent world, more respectful of the consumers. They understand what they're drinking. They take pride in what's in the bottle. And so that's really important to us. And that's what we're trying to get across.
So with my Avua hat, would love more information on that, because
Sure.
I think it's something that, we are excited to share that we're doing nothing
Sure.
with it, right?
Sure.
As you guys are. But kind of back to the 3-year process. So beyond what you mentioned in terms of added sugar as being a hurdle, what were the things that the TTB were hesitant about? How did that play out? How did those conversations go in terms of getting to this place now?
Sure. It was a very bizarre experience, I think, because the individual inspectors who work for the Tax and Trade Bureau, the TTB, that used to be called the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division, but they rebranded after Waco, Texas. So now they're the TTB. So
Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think I knew that.
So the TTB, the individual regulators that you might get assigned to, like you apply for your labels. The way it works is every alcohol has to take a rendering of their label and send it to the TTB and get approval. And the TTB looks and makes sure that all the font sizes are correct and that the background color isn't, so that so you can clearly see what the alcohol content is and what percentage of alcohol and all that kind of stuff is on there. So they regulate that process. And we started years ago by saying no added sugar right here on our label, if you can see that. So no added sugar was a huge no-no at first. And so we would get one regulator who would say, you can't put no added sugar on your label. And we say, but there is no added sugar. And so they then came back, and each one of these steps is like a month of delay before we get an answer and stuff. So they would come back and say, okay, you can put no added sugar on the label, but you have to put ingredients and serving facts on the back label if you're going to say no added sugar on the front. And we go, great. So we'd render all that up on the front and the back label. We'd send it in, get a different regulator who would then say, you can't put any of this stuff on the label. Absolutely not. I'm denying the whole label. And then you'd have to start over. And so then you come back a month later, you give them a new rendering, you get a third regulator who says, I'll allow the no added sugar, but you can't put ingredients and serving facts on the back. And so it was this sort of, red tape nightmare that went on for a very long time. And they're just trying to do their jobs. And I totally understand it. They're trying to protect the public. But there isn't a law right now that clearly defines exactly how this is supposed to be. So they have to be worried about, people doing different things that are trying to manipulate the system to their advantage, which I also totally, because people could say, well, how about if we just list, X and we don't list all the stuff that we don't want anybody to know about? That's something that they're concerned with. So they don't have a uniform code, so it's hard for them to agree to anything we want to do. So we got through our 4th or 5th or 6th different person, they eventually allowed us to do the ingredients and servings facts, but we're not allowed to put no added sugar on the label. So it doesn't say no added sugar.
To remove that.
We had to remove that to get that, and we felt that was way more important.
Yeah.
Because if everybody starts doing that, then we're going to know who's got sulfites, and people like me won't have to go to the hospital after they take a sip of wine. So I think it would be a great thing if we could get everybody to band together and do what's right for the consumers.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it's probably more than most people care to know about the process with the TTB, but it really is. You're kind of rolling dice. You're going to get what mood they're in, what they decide is good and not good. You know, we've had history where we've been doing X for years. It's just in terms of like some simple language. And then all of a sudden that's no good. Then you're like, well, what about all these labels that are approved? And it just becomes, you know, a little bit challenging. It's interesting to think about these elements, which in other areas of labeling, to your point, are highly regulated. Within this universe, theoretically fit into kind of like just an unregulated component, but maybe are seen as like making claims and therefore fall into that guideline. So it's kind of like this very big gray area.
It's a serious gray area. Also because the TTB will enforce the laws of certain countries, but not others. Like they enforce the laws of Mexico to protect tequila as a designation and where and how it's made, and champagne in France and cognac. All those things are protected. You know, all these imported products are protected. Irish whiskey, Scotch whiskey, and so on. They don't enforce the laws of Barbados or Jamaica. So they you know, there's people are putting 100% Jamaican rum on the top of their label, and that stuff's made in Canada.
Right.
You know, but they're selling it as a Jamaican rum. And so
that's related to trade agreements, right? It's effectively like kind of like mutual agreements to recognize appellations and DOs, et cetera, across that.
Yes. And to get the recognition in the first place. But the very large trading partners get this kind of attention, and these very small trading partners don't worldwide. So that's
from a personal level with regard to cachaça, I mean, that was a recognition that only happened in 2013, and it was like kind of a cross recognition of bourbon as a definition, and cachaça as a definition. Previously, it was Brazilian rum. That's what you had to have on the label. We actually, our first labels have Brazilian rum, and then as we were launching, that regulation changed. But it literally was like a trade negotiation between the U.S., right?
And there's the aspect that I think a lot of people, you know, get wrong, is the concept that like rum has no rules, when in fact there's rules everywhere. Every country has rules on how their products are made in the rum industry. So, you know, Martinique has very specific rules regulated by the French AOC regulation. Barbados has a set of rules. Jamaica has a set of rules. People are trying to change those rules now to fit whatever their agenda is, but there are rules. And what the TTB does, they just default to whatever the rules of the home nation are. So if your country allows rum to use like the term Solera, and you can put, you know, Solera 40 on there, and people will think that that's 40 years old because they see the number 40, but the reality is that product isn't 40 years old. Probably there's nothing in that product that's 40 years old. But it's, you know, they call it the 40th Solera system that they work with or something like that. But because their nation, the home nation, allows it, then the U.S. government allows it. So they don't want to police the operation of something going on in another country. So people interpret that in the United States as, oh, rum doesn't have any rules. You can write whatever you want on your labels. And the reality is the only legal age statement is this, where it says aged and then a number and the word years. If it doesn't say those exact those exact elements, you could also say 12 years old or age 12 years. That's all you can say, and it'd be an age statement. And if you ever forget what that is, look on any bottle of whiskey, from Scotland. All the Scotch whiskeys only say, aged so X number of years. So anything else is not an age statement. So if it says slow aged registered trademark, that's not an age statement. If it says Solera, it's not an age statement. If it says whatever. So the idea is, as we start to have transparency, part of the step in transparency is ingredients and serving facts, but also part of the transparency is what's the value of this product that I'm buying that's trying to tell me that it's 40 years old when it's probably not. So should I be paying this much for it? And is that fair to me to, have to try to interpret that somehow rather than being clear on the label? So those are things that people will continue to work toward. I know there's a big movement in the rum industry to get that clarified and to change that because, it does somewhat mislead consumers. But I also understand that there's sensitivities to this because culturally it's been done a certain way for a long time in certain countries. So we don't want to step on their toes, but the reality is if you're going to be transparent, there's really only one way to be transparent. That's just tell the truth.
Right. Right. And it's to me, the reality is it's the quality of the product's the quality of the product.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Being transparent about it. If it's aged X, if it's aged Y, is it a really good product? Is it that much better because it's 10 years versus this? Who really knows, right? But I do think, for us, that's, I guess, one good thing about the category that we've lived in for so long is that there's not many things you can do by the Brazilian definition to the product, just like, an agricole and the DO. So you're beholden to this to some degree, and you don't have a lot of flexibility to play around, within them.
So that's the majority of what we're trying to put together now, and any support that people can bring to that, or ask those questions, or encourage other brands to do the same thing. It's hugely helpful if you do that. We've now sort of cleared a path at TTB, and all the other manufacturers who've been trying to do this. In fact, Mountain Gay's been trying to do it for a long time. Rafael Grissoni called me up. He was like, "How did you get that done?" And we've been trying for years to get that on the label. And I just said, perseverance, dude. But he's a great guy, and I love Mount Gay, and it's a beautiful product, and they're really awesome people there. And so hopefully they're going to be able to cite, if they get the random inspector at the TTB, they can say, wait a minute, Real McCoy was allowed to do this. We want to do it. So hopefully other people can access that, and it'll be something that becomes the norm for the brands that want to voluntarily disclose the information to their consumers.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. I wonder if there's something that you guys as the trailblazers in this can provide to other brands, like Mount Gay, like ourselves, to say, hey, here's a simple explanation of how we got here and what the ruling was.
Sure.
So assuming you get to some other person who has no idea this is the first they're seeing of it, they're probably going to, disregard it immediately. What does that look like? I know I could see a lot of value in that.
Yeah, the thing we did
that works.
We just modeled it on the FDA regulation. So we looked at how the Food and Drug Administration does this with food. And so we picked all of the same things that they're doing with the FDA, because we figured, if that division of the U.S. government has, clearly adjudicated that information, they've got specific mandatories, the whole system it's a plug and play. You could carbon copy that and just add it to alcohol, and it would be simple. So we decided to just go with their approach. And so we followed all the same rules, the font sizes, the box around the serving facts, and the way that you bold the words serving facts and things like that. But every little step is a mandatory code, part of the code as it's written. So we just followed those exact steps. So if you just Google the FDA mandatories, you can look up all those things, and then you on your next label, next time you're going to do a refresh on your labels, just put that stuff on there in those dimensions. Mm-hmm. Send it into the TTB, and if they give you flack about it, just say, well, Real McCoy's doing it. Why can't we do it? They're probably going to hate me.
I'm just going to give them your number, give me your email, give me your number, have you talk to them for me.
Sure. But they can look it up on their end, and they can see, because the inspectors will give their opinion.
Got it.
Keep it in the record. So an inspector who's like, wait a minute, there's no code for this, and you can say, yeah, but this has been discussed and approved.
There's a precedent here.
Yeah, go to the Real McCoy, and they can look up the file and see what the other inspector thought and what their rationale was. Because it's all very legit, and they're all really good people, and they're trying to just do their job in the best way that they see things fit. I don't see this as some nefarious, twisting mustache, people are trying to prevent this information out there. It's not it at all. It's just inspectors are trying to follow the rules, and these rules are very gray. Yeah. So they don't really know what to do, and they don't necessarily want to go out too far on a limb. But it does work now, and we're really happy with it, and I think there's going to be some great results of this in the years ahead.
Very cool. Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have Nathan to do a cocktail with you guys.
Get him on.
Make this conversation fun. Hi, Nathan.
He's muted.
There we go. Hi.
There he is. There he is. How's it going?
It's going awesome.
Love that backdrop. Very festive.
I try.
All right, let's get over to your. Actually, before we do that, Bailey, I've got a couple questions for you.
Okay.
First Tiki drink you've ever tasted?
Oh, first Tiki drink I ever tasted, I think, was a Mai Tai. when I was very young, and my parents, I was interested in, I think I was like 10, and I wanted to make cocktails for my parents because they were drinking cocktails. So I wanted to learn how to do it. And so my mom showed me how to make a Mai Tai when I was 10 years old, and and she let me take a sip of it. And
my dad's equivalent to the Mai Tai was Coors Light. So didn't quite have that experience at 10. Wish I did. Sounds fun. How did you talk about your transition into spirits a little bit? So, obviously coming from, the production world, documentaries, et cetera, how did you end up here?
Yeah, I started in feature films. So early in my career, I grew up in the town of Mystic, Connecticut. So the first movie I worked on was
Mystic Pizza.
Mystic Pizza. This was my first movie.
Yeah.
And so I kind of ran away with the circus. And at the end of that film shoot, I had such a great time. The producers invited me to Los Angeles to go work on their next movie. And so I ended up doing, a whole bunch of feature films with Mark Levinson and Scott Rosenfeld, including Home Alone, which was really amazing to work on.
Oh, there you go.
And those guys were awesome. So that's how I learned how to become a filmmaker, through that process. And then I got into documentary films because I got recruited by Warren Miller to go out to Colorado and run Warren Miller Films and be the president and CEO. And so I ran that company for a number of years and became a partner in it. And then we sold that company. And I decided to go out on my own. And so I started making a lot of films for PBS. And I did, tons over the years, about 150 hours of television programming. So that was really great. And I always loved the process of researching, writing my own scripts, and then directing all the films myself. And that's just very exciting. So I'm into research, and I'm into, sort of the intellectual pursuit of this. So then I made the film about Bill McCoy and the Rum Runners, and that's when I came up with the idea to start the rum company. And that was really fun. And again, that was about 10 years ago. And I had found all these photographs that Bill McCoy and his crew had taken on the deck of their ship back in 1920. And in the pictures, you can see barrels of rum on the deck. And the barrels had a custom stamp from Barbados on the rum, on that top of the barrel. And so we could see that and knew that the rum was coming from Barbados. So my wife Jennifer, and I flew down to Barbados and met with the head of the National Archive and showed her the pictures and said, which distillery would this have been back in 1920? And she said, there's no way to tell. That's just a custom stamp. You can't, tell which distillery. But she assumed it was the Seal family who owned Foursquare Distillery because they were pretty big early on in the 20s. And I thought it might have been Mount Gay. And so while we were in Barbados, I called the owner of Mount Gay, a gentleman named Frank Ward, who was the owner at the time. And he agreed to meet with me. And I showed him the pictures. And he said, it definitely wasn't us. He said, we weren't exporting until 1957. So he thought also it would be Richard Seal. So I went over and met with Richard. And Richard had no record of anything related to Bill McCoy. It was rum running. We weren't writing it down.
Let's talk about that in person.
Yeah. And the Seals, when they started the business, when Richard's great-grandfather started the business versus when they actually incorporated, was in 1926, which is about 6 years after Bill McCoy. So we don't know when and where. We just know it came from Barbados. So when I talked to Richard, I asked him, hey, would you be willing to make a rum for me that is a traditional rum, that is the kind of rum your family would have been making back in 1920, so that when people take a sip of this, it'll be as close as they could possibly get to standing on the deck of Bill McCoy's ship. That was my theory for the brand. And Richard said, I love this idea. And he wasn't working with anybody. He would not work with outside people at that point. So it was, other than selling a little bit of bulk to E&A Shear, which his grandfather, I guess, started doing years ago, or maybe his father did, he wasn't working with outside people. So it was a little bit of a stretch for him, and he agreed to work with me, and it was great. And we've been great friends and collaborators, and he makes amazing rum. I take no credit for the quality of that spirit. That's all Richard Seal. He just does an amazing job. He's so consistent. But it's been a real pleasure to learn from him and be able to apply that now to my own pursuits that we'll do externally to the Real McCoy. So Real McCoy will always come from Foursquare. It's always a Richard Seal product. That's our plan for the brand. And anything that I create, I might, send some down to Richard, and we'll talk about maybe blending some of what he's got with what I made, and we might create little limited editions and things like that. It'll be lots of fun. But I won't be calling stuff out of my still. I won't be calling that the Real McCoy. So we're still developing that. Just so you'll always know when you buy this product what the Prodigy is, our progeny is, the history, and so on.
Got it.
So that was it. That's how I got into rum making, and it's just been absolutely fascinating. It's completely taken over my life. I don't have any time to write and direct films anymore, although I think about it all the time. But I just don't. It's too busy right now. So someday I will definitely get back into filmmaking. But right now I'm really enjoying the rum scene, and I've made so many friends all over the world with the rum family. It's such a great group of people. To have a trade organization like ours that, thanks to Fetty putting together all these wonderful rum festivals and things like that, and all the other rum fest producers around the world, it's just absolutely spectacular to go to these events and meet all these wonderful people and get to know legends like Joy Spence, who you're going to have next week. Really, really beautiful.
Awesome. Very cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
So Nathan, back to you. We have a little presentation here on the classic corn and oil. Walk us through it, sir.
Yeah, I think a lot of people might think of the corn and oil and think of it as like an early tiki drink, but this goes so much further back. And this really is the cocktail of the island of Barbados. It's a lot of people think of it as kind of an island old-fashioned in a way because of its build. It's super simple, and that's why it's a great cocktail for right now when a lot of people are stuck at home. You don't need a lot of ingredients. You'd be fine with 2 bottles. But with a couple little extra ingredients makes it kind of a prime corn and oil. The center of this, of course, is a beautiful Barbados aged rum, because this is the drink of Barbados. I like to use our 12-year Real McCoy for that. But of course, the other ingredient that is kind of a thing of mystery a bit, and I think also why people think of this as a tiki drink, is falernum. Now, falernum is kind of an interesting ingredient in itself, and it's important to know that this is indigenous to Barbados. So, there's a lot of myths surrounding it, and it's actually kind of a tricky thing to research. There's a lot of mythology that can be hard to kind of know what's true and what's fake news with falernum. But I have a couple handy slides to kind of help break it down a little bit. So, what is falernum? Well, originally, it's just a unaged white rum and lime juice combination with sugar to kind of help preserve it. That was made by pretty much every rum distillery in Barbados at one time. So there would have been many kinds of falernum available on the island of Barbados. It's always low in proof, about between 8% and 11% ABV. And, the kind of the optional addition that came was spices, and canonical spices and flavors would be, almond oil, originally from bitter almond kernels, clove, and then nutmeg or mace. The name is another thing that people kind of go back and forth about, but the story that seems to ring the most true is that there was a visitor to the island, and he was at a rum distillery and plantation and watching a worker make the falernum and sampling the falernum and saying, "Wow, this is fantastic. What's in this? Like, what are the ingredients in this?" And her response was, "You have falernum." So she wasn't gonna share her secrets that easily to this wanderer. So that it's a fun story. Who knows if it's true, but it's not coming from Falernian wine, which is something that people think about a lot. That's just a coincidence. It also was not something that was developed by bartenders for cocktails. Now, if you talk about falernum with a Barbadian, they're gonna kind of roll their eyes about kind of the rise of falernum in the United States with like the craft cocktail revival, because a lot of bartenders started making their own falernum syrups at home. And any Barbadian would tell you that's not falernum. It's not from Barbados. It's not falernum. It also does always have proof. So if it's something that is a homemade syrup, that's to them is not falernum. It's not something that was homemade and thus commercialized. So, I've definitely heard of people talk about John D. Taylor's developed falernum and say, "Oh, that's like a commercial falernum." No, it all kind of started at rum distilleries. So this is what falernum started out as, and then it became something that people adopted and did their own spins on. Also, ingredients, something that our distiller, Richard Seal, who makes John D. Taylor at Foursquare, he says that it doesn't have ginger, allspice, cinnamon. Those are all kind of modern inventions and additions. So this is the one that I think most people are familiar with on the market. As I said, it is made at Foursquare, and it is a low proof liqueur that is the cornerstone of the corn oil.
And Nathan, can I add one little comment there? The one thing I think is really important to recognize about what Nathan just said is the fact that, you know, everyone is very concerned about cultural appropriation these days. And what I was just talking about with labeling in the United States, where the U.S. government doesn't enforce the laws of Barbados, so they don't enforce falernum. So falernum is as much of a specific product made in a specific place, originated there, as tequila or cognac or champagne. So we don't know this, so we are innocently, a lot of bartenders are innocently like making their own falernums, or they're starting their own products and calling it falernum and things like that, but they don't recognize that that's stepping on the toes of those actual falernum producers. Just like saying, oh, I didn't know I can't call this a cognac, or I can't take this agave that I grew in my house and make it into a tequila and call it tequila in New Jersey or someplace like that. The people in Jalisco would say, no, that's not tequila. So it's the same thing. So you have to respect the people who are the originators of this product and try not to appropriate their culture. You could call it something else and talk about it being similar to that product, but to call it falernum if you made it not in Barbados is a kind of a no-no.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like you'd be calling it Caribbean spiced syrup. You know, it's just wouldn't be the same thing.
Yeah.
So falernum first was mentioned in print in the United States around 1935. This is a fun little article from a wine critic, Frank Schoonmaker. It has some. My favorite line is, "Those who deal in rum are people utterly without charity or humanitarian instincts." Oh man! And also to make signs to say give us falernum. I kind of love that as well. But it was about first experiencing Barbados falernum from some friends who were traveling in Barbados and then wanting to find it in the city and it being so difficult to find. Now, in fact, falernum was already in the States at that time. Slide, I'll show you something here. Of course, you know, Don the Beachcomber, famously kind of the godfather of Tiki, opened his bar in Hollywood in 1934. Well, he did have falernum on his menu. The thing about Don, though, is he was very secretive, as many of us know, about his recipes. So while it appeared in a lot of his cocktails on the opening menu, no one knew it was in there. And that's because in his recipes, you know, he famously used code to hide his secrets. And upon inspecting his old recipes and sketchbooks, it was found that there was an ingredient, go to the next slide, that there was an ingredient called Munraloff in a lot of his recipes. And then kind of the palm to the forehead is when someone realized that's just falernum spelled backwards. So kind of a fun thing about Don and about kind of the birth of falernum in the United States. Now, it did appear earlier on in other countries, mainly because travelers and traders were enjoying it while they were in the islands, bringing it back and such. And in fact, the cocktail that we're going to make, the corn and oil, first existed as a brandy cocktail, as far as we know. So it was something that the rich were enjoying, you know, with the brandy. They were using that beautiful falernum from Barbados. So kind of an interesting thing about that cocktail. And then more about the corn oil itself. You know, speaking of that kind of cocktail revival where bartenders started putting their own spins on everything, it kind of did some damage to the corn and oil. This was not a cocktail named for a slick of oil on its surface or a floater of dark rum. Of course, in Barbados, if you want to talk about dark rum, you're going to get more eye rolls, right? I mean, this is not something that exists. This is a modern invention. The corn oil does not have blackstrap rum. It doesn't have dark rum. Blackstrap rum isn't actually a thing. You know, it doesn't. It's not a type of rum, rather. So this is just an aged rum cocktail. The name, though, does not refer to the float. What it does refer to is, well, what we think anyway, there were a lot of missionaries, German missionaries on the island of Barbados around the time that this cocktail emerged. And the thought is that it's actually referring to a Bible verse from Deuteronomy. So it's I will give you the rain of your land in his due season, the first rain and the latter rain, that thou mayest gather in thy corn and thy wine and thine oil. It's probably where that comes from, as far as we know.
Interesting.
So we'll go ahead and make this cocktail. Again, it's super, super simple. And it's wonderful because you can just
interject quickly.
Oh, sure.
I'm sorry. If
Please.
anybody wants to make this cocktail at home, please do. We can see the spec right here. You guys probably got it in your email. We encourage you guys to post it up with @Tiki by the CNJ, #Tiki by the C. Share it out there. Back to you.
All right. So all you need is a double old fashioned to start. Start with a little Angostura bitters, a few dashes there. Now, if you get this drink in Barbados, you're probably not going to have lime as an ingredient. It'll probably just be your garnish. I, however, kind of like that little acid kick. I think it balances out the sweetness of the falernum nicely and brings out some of the floral notes. So I like to use about a half a lime. And you can either just use the juice. I kind of like to have a little bit of the oil in there too. So sometimes what I'll do is just squeeze it in and then give it a little press with a muddler. And then next, of course, our rum. So Real McCoy 5 year is fantastic for this cocktail. If you want something a little more luxe, that's when I like to go for the 12 and do 2 ounces of that. And then a scant ½ ounce of your velvet falernum. So again, kind of hearkening to an old-fashioned type of a spec where you just have a little bit of sweetness with your bold, beautiful spirit. And then just add some ice. I have the finest coffee shop ice. Oh, pandemic.
Pandemic ice. It's a new business idea.
So you can do a big rock, kind of like an old fashioned. That works well for this cocktail. Some bars, especially tiki bars, like to do crushed ice. So you'll see that pretty often too, that this is built in crushed ice. I do not have enough ice, so forgive this. But then give it a nice stir. Just get it nice and chilled. And then if you'd so like, your lime garnish. But it's just like the simplest, most refreshing, straightforward cocktail. And it's perfect for this time of year too.
Lovely.
Awesome.
Cheers. Cheers. Easy one to make at home. Super delicious. Nothing wrong with that drink. That's for sure.
Classic.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. We're going to continue on here. Let's just throw up some contact info. So webmaster Real McCoy Spirits, Facebook / the Real McCoy Rum, and all the info there. So if anybody wants to get in touch with these guys, ask more questions, learn about labeling, please do reach out. All right. Heading on to our next session. Questions with the Tiki fam. We're going to add in Amy Kaskovich here. How's it going?
Hello. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Not too bad. I'm drinking beer here because that's what I have in the fridge, pandemic and all. But I wish I had a corn and oil.
I'm drinking an iced coffee. I wish I had a corn and oil too. Awesome.
All right. All right. We'll have to correct that later today. All right.
Yes.
Do you want to introduce yourself to the crowd?
Sure. I'm Amy Kaskovich. I work for Pete at Drifter Spirits. I've been with the company for about 2.5 years, and I live in Oakland, California.
Awesome. Originally from Mass.
Originally from Mass, yes.
There you go. All right. 5 questions. Favorite cocktail?
Okay. Daiquiri is just kind of my go-to. Since working for Avwa and being introduced to the still strength, that's how I usually like to make it now, with a little bit of cane sugar, lime juice, easy.
Sounds good. It's funny. I remember we did that Tiki by the Sea session where it was like 6 daiquiris in a row. Every presentation was a daiquiri, which was kind of awesome and also ridiculous.
It was my favorite.
All right. Favorite Tiki by the Sea memory?
Ooh. Well, it's always a real treat watching your dad, Tom. I feel like most of my funnier memories revolve around him. But I really love the garnish wars every year. I think that's like my favorite thing. There's just like so much energy. People are just running around being crazy and showing their creative sides. And I feel like people are super competitive, and I love that.
Yeah, that's very fun. For anybody who hasn't experienced it, we do a competition, the only cocktail competition where it doesn't matter what's in the glass. It only matters how awesome and fun your garnish is. So it's kind of a scavenger hunt in Wildwood, New Jersey, or wherever we're executing it. Very, very entertaining. All right, best food you've eaten in Wildwood.
Oh God, so much. Well, I mean, Tom's like whole spread that he does, like the seafood.
Really, you love this one.
Spread is, I mean, like you said, I'm from Massachusetts, so it's you don't get food like that in California, like that kind of traditional like clam bakey style. So that's always a super big treat for me.
That's fair. Yeah, missing out right now for sure. Weirdest Wildwood experience. Weirdest experience.
Weirdest. I would have to say when we went to the boardwalk. I don't know if you were there for this one, but we were on the little like racetrack, like the little go-karts, and my cart just kind of, I don't know what happened, like the steering wheel got stuck. It just started like going in circles, and I couldn't stop it. Like they had to come out onto the track and like haul my car off.
Wow.
So that was fun.
That is good. I pretty much always get barred from these things because I keep spinning people out. I just can't really follow the rules properly in go-karting.
I will say that was after I got yelled at for tailgating. So that was just a real.
It used to be a lot more Wild West, and now it's very safe. It's kind of boring these days, honestly, All right.
Yeah.
Last question. Favorite nickname for Nate Whitehouse? Favorite nickname?
Oh boy. I mean, the Sheriff, classic. Nate
Whitehouse is my business partner. For anybody who doesn't know,
so many good ones.
He's got a lot of nicknames. The Sheriff. That is a classic one. The Sheriff. All right. Thank you for joining us. Hope you had fun. All right. Next week, as mentioned, we're very excited to have Joy Spence, Master Blender of Appleton, and Anne-Louise Marquis, Portfolio Brand Ambassador for Campari, catching up with the Queen of Rum. So it's an honor to have her on. Really stoked to just kind of dig into all the history behind that, being a female master blender in this universe, and really whatever she wants to talk about. So please do join us for that. I'm going to bring everybody in to say goodbye.
Yep.
Thanks, Pete. That was great. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for dropping the knowledge. I'm excited to go fight the DTB to put a bunch of facts on the back of my label now.
Right on. That would be fantastic.
Nathan, hanging with you.
Yeah.
Lovely coffee ice.
Baxter's even joining.
Oh, Baxter. Look at Baxter. We're frozen. Baxter's frozen. The joys of the back up. All right. Awesome hanging out. See you next week, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.